Huawei is very dangerous.
Rarely does a country go to war with a private company.
We have met the enemy, and it is Huawei.
We're not going to do business with Huawei.
Huawei represents a national security risk.
But is this really about Huawei? Or is it something bigger than that?
If you think Huawei is just a victim of the trade war, you're completely wrong. Here in early 2026, Huawei is no longer just surviving. They're launching a counterattack. The release of the latest HarmonyOS version marks a turning point, 100% independent from Android. They've essentially said goodbye to Android and started building their own digital empire. This isn't just a new operating system. This is China's declaration of technological independence, and it has the potential to shake Google's global dominance. Why should Google's panic have just begun? To understand how massive Huawei's move really is, we need to realize how strong Google's grip on the world has been. For more than a decade, Android has been the absolute ruler. Look at your phone right now. Chances are it's running Android. From waking up and checking Gmail, finding addresses with Google Maps, watching videos on YouTube, to storing files on Google Drive, our lives have become inseparable from Google's ecosystem. This dominance is nearly impossible to shake. Globally, Android's market share remains solid at over 70%. Other tech giants who tried to challenge it, like Microsoft with Windows Phone or Samsung with Tizen, all collapsed. They didn't fail because their technology was bad, but because they couldn't build one critical thing, an app ecosystem. The ecosystem is everything. You won't want to switch to a new OS if your ride-hailing apps, mobile banking, or favorite social media aren't available. Developers are also reluctant to create apps for an OS with no users. This is the vicious cycle that trapped all of Android's challengers before. Google knows this perfectly well. Losing one phone manufacturer, even one as big as Huawei, might not initially seem fatal globally. But what Huawei is doing this time is different. They're not just making a rival OS. They're building a fortress in the world's largest smartphone market. Their own country, China. Something extraordinary is happening in China. In the second quarter of 2025, HarmonyOS's market share reached 17%, consistently surpassing Apple's iOS, which stood at 16%. Although Android still leads with 66%, this trend shows that in its home territory, Huawei has successfully created a real and growing alternative force. This is no longer just a ripple. This is a wave that's forming. Imagine a brand that many analysts had sentenced to death just a few years ago because it was cut off from Google, now actually beating Apple in its domestic market. This is what should make Google wary. The threat from HarmonyOS isn't a threat that will bring down Android tomorrow morning. No, this is a long-term threat that's strategic and geopolitical. Huawei has proven that it's actually possible to build an alternative ecosystem strong enough to survive and even thrive, at least in one giant region. The question is, will this stop in China alone? So, what exactly is HarmonyOS, and why is it different from the others? The answer lies in its latest version, known as HarmonyOS Next. The early versions of HarmonyOS, to be honest, still relied on the Android AOSP base to ensure apps could still run. That was a smart transition step. But HarmonyOS Next is a giant leap. This is no longer Android without Google. Huawei has completely discarded all Android code and built their OS from scratch on top of their own kernel called the Hongmeng kernel. They've truly cut the umbilical cord with Android. Technically, this is an extremely bold move. HarmonyOS's architecture uses something called a microkernel. Simply put, imagine Android as a large, rigid, monolithic building. All parts are interconnected. If one part errors, the entire building can shake. HarmonyOS with its microkernel is more like a building made of small, independent Lego blocks. This architecture theoretically makes the OS lighter, more secure, and more efficient. Huawei even claims their new system is 30% smoother and can save memory usage. But the real magic of HarmonyOS isn't about performance on a single device. Its main vision is a distributed ecosystem. This is their flagship feature, Super Device. Imagine this scenario. You're working on a presentation on your Huawei laptop. You need a photo from your phone. No need to look for a data cable or send files back and forth. You just open the control center and there's your phone icon. You drag the phone icon to the laptop icon and boom, your phone screen appears on the laptop. You can directly drag and drop files from your phone's gallery to your presentation slides as if it's just a regular folder on your laptop. Then you want to continue a meeting while walking to the kitchen. You drag your headphone icon to the phone icon, and the meeting audio instantly transfers to your headphones. You see an important notification on the tablet sitting on the dining table. You can reply directly from your laptop without touching the tablet at all. This is the true power of HarmonyOS. This isn't about separate devices anymore. It's about a digital fabric that unites all Huawei devices into one supercomputer. Phone, tablet, laptop, watch, TV, even cars. Everything can share screens, keyboards, speakers, and files seamlessly. This is a level of integration that even Apple, famous for its ecosystem, hasn't been able to achieve this fluidly. Google, with Android having to run on thousands of different types of hardware, can only dream of having integration this tight. Okay, the strength in China has been proven. The integration technology is also incredibly cool. So does this mean we'll all soon switch to HarmonyOS? Well, hold on. This is where we need to look at the bigger reality. The biggest and most fundamental challenge for Huawei is the app ecosystem outside China. Yes, App Gallery, Huawei's app store, has indeed grown rapidly. In China, almost all major apps are already available there. But globally, the story is far different. For us in Indonesia, for example, the question is always the same. Will my mobile banking app work? What about Gojek, Grab, Tokopedia? Can I still open Google Docs for work or Google Maps to find directions? In previous HarmonyOS versions that were still based on Android, this problem could be worked around using third-party apps like Gbox, although the experience was often imperfect. But with HarmonyOS Next, which is purely without Android code, the challenge becomes many times greater. Android apps simply won't be able to be installed at all. Everything must be rebuilt natively, specifically for HarmonyOS. This is Huawei's biggest gamble. They're sacrificing compatibility for performance, security, and complete control. In China, where Google services are blocked and there's strong support from the government and local developers, this strategy works. But to conquer the global market, Huawei must convince thousands of international developers to invest in creating special versions of their apps. This is a tough fight that will take years. Until now, HarmonyOS has only captured around 4% of the global market share, a number that's not yet enough to make developers flock over. Therefore, it's important to note that as of early 2026, the launch strategy for the fully independent HarmonyOS is still focused on the Chinese market. Huawei devices sold globally will most likely still use an Android base with their interface. A reality that shows Huawei is well aware of this ecosystem challenge. So, Google's panic isn't because they'll lose the global market overnight. Their high-level vigilance comes from several things. First, losing licenses from tens of millions of Huawei devices every year is a real revenue loss. Second, and more importantly, HarmonyOS creates a dangerous example. A country with massive market power can build a viable alternative to America's tech ecosystem. This is a blueprint for digital independence that will surely be noticed by other countries. So, let's conclude. Is HarmonyOS a real threat to Android's dominance? The answer is yes, but with an important caveat. This is a long-term strategic threat that is currently very concentrated in China. HarmonyOS Next is an extraordinary technological achievement. Huawei has done something considered impossible, building a modern OS from scratch, complete with innovative architecture and super strong ecosystem features. In less than 6 years after being hit with sanctions, they've managed to turn crisis into an innovation trigger. Is Google really panicking? Perhaps panic is too strong a word. Highly vigilant is a more accurate term. Google is now seeing with their own eyes that their once invincible empire actually has cracks. Those cracks are called geopolitics and the domestic market power of a superpower nation. There are even rumors that Google is trying to merge Android and Chrome OS to create a better integrated experience, a move that might be inspired by what Huawei has done. Ultimately, this battle is more than just Huawei versus Google. This is a sign of tectonic plate shifts in the tech world toward a multipolar world where no single ecosystem dominates everything. For us as consumers, this could mean more choices in the future, but it could also mean a more fragmented digital world. Now it's your turn. After seeing all this, HarmonyOS's advanced technology, the power of its ecosystem, but also its very real limitations outside China, the question is simple. If tomorrow Huawei launched a phone with pure HarmonyOS in your country, would you be willing to leave the comfort of Google's Android ecosystem to try Huawei's version of the future? Write your reasons and opinions in the comments below. Let's discuss. And don't forget to subscribe for more tech analysis that matters. The moderately weakened version of NVIDIA's cutting-edge Blackwell architecture has become the latest casualty in a technological war that's quietly reshaping the future of artificial intelligence across the planet. This isn't just another trade dispute. What's happening right now represents a fundamental fracture in how the world builds and deploys artificial intelligence. For years, NVIDIA dominated the global market for AI chips, the specialized processors that power everything from ChatGPT to autonomous vehicles to military surveillance systems. Chinese tech giants relied heavily on these American chips because nothing else came close to their performance. But that dependency is ending faster than anyone in Silicon Valley anticipated, and the consequences are already rippling through global markets. The rejection of the B30A chip tells us something alarming about where this technology competition is heading. NVIDIA thought it had found a compromise, a middle path between American security concerns and Chinese market demand. They engineered a chip that operated at exactly half the computational power of their standard Blackwell design, carefully calibrated to stay within the export control limits imposed by Washington. On paper, this should have worked. In practice, it failed spectacularly because China has fundamentally changed its strategy. According to CNBC correspondent Christina Partsenevelos, the Trump administration positioned itself as an arbitrator in negotiations between NVIDIA and Chinese buyers, creating a bureaucratic maze that has effectively locked the American company out of the market. But the deeper problem isn't just political interference. Chinese companies are telling NVIDIA something brutally honest. We don't need your compromised technology anymore because we're building our own, and it's getting better every month. The numbers reveal the scale of NVIDIA's collapse in China. Market analysts tracking the AI chip sector report that NVIDIA's share in certain segments of China's artificial intelligence hardware market has plummeted to essentially zero. This represents a catastrophic loss for a company that once viewed China as indispensable to its growth strategy. The Chinese market isn't just large, it's voracious, consuming AI computing power at rates that exceed anywhere else on Earth as the country races to deploy artificial intelligence across its economy, surveillance systems, and military infrastructure. But NVIDIA's loss is really just the visible symptom of a much larger transformation. China isn't simply replacing American chips with inferior domestic alternatives while waiting for U.S. export controls to ease. They're constructing an entirely parallel technology ecosystem, one designed to match and eventually exceed American capabilities without relying on any foreign components. This isn't defensive adaptation. Its offensive ambition, backed by hundreds of billions of dollars in state investment. At the center of this domestic ecosystem stands Huawei, the telecommunications giant that survived American sanctions and emerged stronger, more focused, and absolutely committed to technological self-reliance. Huawei is now producing AI chips explicitly designed to compete with NVIDIA's next-generation Rubin architecture, chips that haven't even hit the market yet. Think about what that means. Chinese engineers are designing products to match American technology that doesn't fully exist yet, working from technical intelligence, reverse engineering, and rapidly advancing domestic research capabilities. Even more significant, Huawei is developing its own high-bandwidth memory, or HBM, a critical component that acts like ultra-fast short-term memory for AI processors. HBM has been one of the key technological choke points where Chinese chip makers depended on foreign suppliers, primarily South Korean companies like SK Hynix and Samsung. By bringing HBM production in-house, Huawei is eliminating one of the last remaining dependencies in the AI chip supply chain. This move toward vertical integration, building every component domestically, represents exactly the kind of strategic depth that American policymakers feared China would achieve. Huawei isn't working alone. Companies most Americans have never heard of are pouring resources into AI computing. Cambricon Technologies, founded less than a decade ago, specializes in neural processing units designed specifically for machine learning workloads. More Threads, established in 2020, is building graphics processors that can handle both AI training and deployment. Byron Tech focuses on general-purpose GPU computing for artificial intelligence applications. Individually, none of these companies can yet match NVIDIA's technological lead. Collectively, they represent an industrial mobilization aimed at achieving complete independence from American technology within years, not decades. The irony is almost painful. American export controls, designed to slow China's AI development by denying access to cutting-edge chips, have instead accelerated Chinese investment in domestic alternatives while permanently severing NVIDIA from one of its most important markets. Washington's strategy assumed that Chinese companies couldn't quickly replicate the sophisticated designs and manufacturing processes required for high-performance AI chips. That assumption is proving catastrophically wrong. Recent regulatory moves in China underscore how official this shift has become. Chinese authorities opened an investigation into NVIDIA's H20 AI chips, which were previously the company's workaround for selling into the Chinese market under export restrictions. The investigation, focused on alleged violations of anti-monopoly laws, sent an unmistakable political message. American chip companies are no longer welcome partners, but potential security threats. The regulatory pressure has practical effects too, creating uncertainty that pushes Chinese buyers toward domestic suppliers even when American products might still offer technical advantages. A senior Republican congressman recently compared selling NVIDIA's most advanced AI chips to China to giving weapons to Iran. A statement that reveals just how thoroughly artificial intelligence has become militarized in Washington's strategic thinking. This isn't hyperbole from the American national security perspective. Modern AI chips don't just power consumer applications. They're foundational to autonomous weapon systems, signals intelligence, facial recognition networks, and military simulation environments. Every advanced AI processor sold to China potentially enhances the People's Liberation Army's computational capabilities. NVIDIA finds itself trapped between two governments with incompatible objectives. To satisfy American export controls, they must weaken their products to the point where Chinese buyers find them unattractive compared to domestic alternatives. To satisfy Chinese market demands, they would need to offer chips powerful enough to violate American export restrictions. There's no middle ground left, no sweet spot where both governments are satisfied and NVIDIA maintains market access. The Trump administration's role as self-appointed arbitrator in these negotiations adds another layer of uncertainty. NVIDIA reportedly came close to securing approval for Blackwell chip exports to China, only to have the deal blocked by officials who viewed any advanced AI technology transfer as unacceptable risk. The political calculus in Washington has shifted so dramatically that companies can no longer predict which products might gain approval or when policy might change. This regulatory volatility makes long-term business planning nearly impossible. Behind closed doors, NVIDIA executives are confronting a reality that would have seemed unthinkable just 3 years ago. They're not just losing market share in China, they're watching the entire relationship disintegrate in real time. The company came remarkably close to securing approval for Blackwell chip exports, negotiations that stretched for months and involved countless technical specifications and security assurances. But at the final hour, Trump-era officials intervened, viewing any transfer of advanced AI computing power as an unacceptable national security gamble. That decision didn't just kill one deal, it signaled that the door to China has been permanently sealed for high-performance American AI technology. What makes this particularly devastating is the timing. NVIDIA engineered the B30A chip with mathematical precision, calculating exactly how much performance to sacrifice while still delivering a product Chinese customers might want. They split the Blackwell architecture's capabilities right down the middle, creating a processor that theoretically complied with every letter of American export law while still offering meaningful computational power. But compliance wasn't enough, and that's the lesson reverberating through every American tech company trying to maintain business in China. The rules have changed so fundamentally that even products designed explicitly to satisfy government restrictions can't make it through the gauntlet. Chinese buyers looked at the B30A chip and made a cold calculation. Why invest billions in deliberately crippled American technology when domestic alternatives are improving month by month and come without political strings attached? The performance gap that once made NVIDIA irreplaceable has narrowed dramatically. More importantly, Chinese companies now understand that any dependence on American suppliers creates vulnerability that Washington can and will exploit. That realization has transformed procurement decisions across the entire Chinese technology sector. The market data tells a brutal story. In certain segments of China's artificial intelligence chip market, segments where NVIDIA once held dominant positions, the company's share has effectively collapsed to zero, not declined, not decreased, but essentially vanished. These aren't marginal product categories. They represent massive pools of demand in the world's second largest economy as it deploys AI across industries from manufacturing to surveillance to autonomous vehicles. Every percentage point of market share NVIDIA loses in China represents hundreds of millions in revenue that won't return, even if political winds eventually shift. President Xi Jinping addressed these technology tensions directly at the recent APEC economic leaders meeting, though his language was diplomatic. He emphasized the importance of working together to keep industrial and supply chains stable and smooth, and called for strengthening our links rather than severing them. On the surface, this sounds like a plea for continued cooperation, but the underlying message was unmistakable. China will pursue multilateral partnerships where possible, but won't allow foreign technology bottlenecks to constrain its development. Beijing views American export controls not as legitimate security measures, but as economic warfare designed to prevent China's rise, and they're responding by making foreign technology optional rather than essential. The speed of China's domestic chip development has caught many Western analysts off guard. Huawei's AI processors are now being designed to compete directly with NVIDIA's Rubin architecture, a product line that hasn't even fully launched yet. This isn't reverse engineering of existing products. It's forward-looking design based on technical intelligence, aggressive research timelines, and massive resource allocation. Chinese engineers are essentially working in parallel with their American counterparts, aiming to reach similar performance targets through different design approaches. The gap isn't closed yet, but it's closing faster than most experts predicted even 2 years ago. Perhaps even more significant than the processors themselves is Huawei's development of high-bandwidth memory. HBM serves as ultra-fast temporary storage for AI chips, feeding them data at the incredible speeds required for training large neural networks. For years, this technology represented a critical choke point in the AI supply chain, dominated by South Korean manufacturers like SK Hynix and Samsung. Chinese chip makers could produce sophisticated processors, but still relied on foreign companies for this essential component. Huawei's move to develop HBM internally represents exactly the kind of vertical integration that eliminates foreign dependencies and creates a genuinely self-sufficient technology stack. The broader Chinese AI chip ecosystem extends far beyond Huawei. Cambricon Technologies has carved out expertise in neural processing units, optimized specifically for machine learning tasks. Chips that don't try to do everything but excel at the narrow, computationally intensive work of training and running AI models. More Threads, founded only 5 years ago, is building graphics processors capable of handling both the training phase and the deployment phase of AI systems. BioNTech focuses on general-purpose GPU computing tailored for artificial intelligence applications. Individually, none of these companies represents an existential threat to NVIDIA's technological leadership. Collectively, they form an industrial base capable of supporting China's AI ambitions without a single American chip. The Chinese government has made this technological independence an official priority through more than just investment. Regulatory authorities recently opened an investigation into NVIDIA's H20 chips, which had been the company's previous workaround for operating under export restrictions. The investigation focuses on alleged anti-monopoly violations, a charge that may or may not have technical merit, but definitely carries political weight. The message to Chinese companies is crystal clear. The government views reliance on American AI chips as a strategic vulnerability, and buyers should shift to domestic suppliers regardless of short-term performance trade-offs. American policymakers designed export controls with a specific theory of victory, that denying China access to cutting-edge chips would slow their AI development enough to preserve American technological advantage for years or even decades. That theory rested on assumptions about how difficult advanced semiconductor design and manufacturing would prove for Chinese firms, how long it would take them to close the performance gap, and how dependent they would remain on American technology. Every one of those assumptions is being stress-tested in real time, and the results are forcing uncomfortable questions about whether the strategy is working as intended or backfiring catastrophically. The national security logic behind the restrictions is genuine from Washington's perspective. Modern AI chips power military applications from autonomous drones to signals intelligence to battlefield simulation systems. Every high-performance processor that reaches China potentially enhances the computational capabilities of the People's Liberation Army. When that Republican congressman compared selling advanced NVIDIA chips to China to giving weapons to Iran, he was articulating a world view that has become mainstream in American national security circles. Artificial intelligence is viewed as foundational to future military power, and therefore AI chips are treated as weapons systems, requiring the same strict export controls. But weapons embargoes work best when the target country can't produce alternatives. China has demonstrated both the technical capability and political will to build a domestic AI chip industry that, while not yet equal to American technology, is advancing rapidly and meeting enough of the market's needs to make Chinese buyers willing to accept performance trade-offs in exchange for supply security. American export controls have accelerated this process rather than preventing it, essentially giving China a deadline to achieve self-sufficiency while guaranteeing that domestic chip makers face no competition from superior American products. NVIDIA is trapped in the middle of this technological Cold War with no good options. The company can't lobby its way back into China because the decision isn't really about NVIDIA. It's about fundamental strategic competition between great powers. They can't design around the restrictions because Chinese buyers now prefer domestic chips, regardless of performance gaps. They can't wait out the political tensions because every month of exclusion allows Chinese competitors to gain ground, claim market share, and improve their products. The Chinese market that once represented boundless growth potential has transformed into a cautionary tale about what happens when commercial relationships become casualties of geopolitical conflict. The uncertainty itself has become a strategic problem. Companies making long-term investment decisions need to predict regulatory environments years in advance. When export rules can change without warning, when products